Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday, Rabbi Orlofsky. And this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Thank you. Thank you very much. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we're happy to have you around. And do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. As you may have guessed from my introduction, this is my birthday episode. How do I know that? Because our episode is sponsored by Tzvi and Hinda Friedman. If my calculation is correct, this week's episode both should coincide with Rabbi Orlofsky's birthday. Perhaps you have come to terms with your mortality, but the rest of us have not. Baruch Hashem. Yeah. In fact, someone said to me, when are you going to write your own book? Right? There is a book out there with my name on it that I didn't write, but I was going to write my own book. So someone said, when are you going to put it out? And I said, I don't know. Maybe it'll be printed posthumously. So they said, oh, good. I hope it's soon. So yes, I have come to terms with my other mortality, but other people have not. Baruch Hashem. Please be healthy, happy, and able to continue your incredible work for many, many years and many birthdays to come. Thank you very much. So that's why I started off by wishing myself a happy birthday. And I have to say, this is not the only birthday message I have received. This is what happens when you make a podcast that's watched by thousands of people and you point out on Parshas Bo that it was your bar mitzvah parsha. People figure out when you come around to Bo, your birthday must come out sometime around then. And it is in fact true. Now, that's not always true because my son Yaakov, he was born number 3. I had 2 girls, then I had Yaakov, then I had 6 more girls. So I only had 1 boy. My father had 6 boys. And Yaakov, his bar mitzvah officially came out on Parshas Akev, because he was born on Motzi Shabbos Nachamu. So he had a bar mitzvah bo bayom. We made a Suda, and then he had a Sudas Chaverim in school, and then that Thursday he had an Aliyah at the Kaisel, and then we did that Shabbos Akev, but my family couldn't come in until Parshas Re'eh, and so he prepared another bar mitzvah parsha. Was it worth it to make 2 bar mitzvahs? Well, my mother was taking everybody out to the Ramada here in Yerushalayim. So the short answer is yes. So when you ask when was his bar mitzvah, it's a little more complicated. Oh, and then he had an evening, one of those evenings that Rabbi Shurkin described as the Berekes Sefer Exchange. They have this in Yerushalayim. You sit down, they give you a plate with a bereka, and you give them a sefer, and we call it a wash. So that's how we have another bar mitzvah. So he had an evening also. So I said, my father had 6 boys and made 6 bar mitzvahs. I had 1 boy and made 6 bar mitzvahs. But me, I was one of the 6 boys, so my bar mitzvah was actually pretty simple. And it's interesting. My father had a policy by the bar mitzvahs that except for my oldest brother, Jason, Oliver Shalom, and my youngest brother, Bruce, so sei gesund und stark, he let everybody choose what to do. So one brother said, I'll just keep all the gifts. I want a small party, and I'll keep all the gifts for myself. My brother, Gedalia in Muncie, said that he wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. This was 1966. It was before the 6-Day War, It was not very common for people to go to Eretz Yisrael, but he had this love of Eretz Yisrael even back then. He chose to use his bar mitzvah for that. My oldest brother, my father said, I don't care, I'm making a big party, I don't care what you want. And that was his first bar mitzvah. So he was a florist. He spelled out Jason in 2,000 roses. So it was one of those old time bar mitzvahs, starts with that, those little kind of fruit cup in the little glass bowl and stuff, So that was a very exciting evening. I was 5 years old, I think. And for my brother Bruce, it was in Eretz Yisrael. So he had a bar mitzvah the Kaisel, and then he laned in the Heichel Shlomo. There was no great synagogue yet, so he would have been there. So Heichel Shlomo had his bar mitzvah, and And it was very exciting. Me, I didn't have much of a choice because my grandmother passed away just before my bar mitzvah. So my mother was in Shloshim. So they said, you can't have much of a bar mitzvah. And I was like, yeah, that's par for the course. Yeah, I more or less expected that. So my bar mitzvah was on Shabbos. And it was, so they made like, a luncheon in shul, which was kind of ironic because since we were going to a conservative synagogue, so instead of having an evening, everybody drove to shul. In fact, I had become Shomer Shabbos about a month before my bar mitzvah, so I was walking to shul and relatives kept pulling up, offering me rides. I said, that's okay. I'll walk it, So it was pretty exciting. I'll never forget that Shabbos was, in fact, the closest thing that I had ever experienced to a Shabbos. Because, as I've mentioned before, my father would come home Friday night, whatever time it was. My mother would light candles, even though it was after Shabbos. And my father would make kiddush, and he would wash for some reason. Only he would wash. And then we would make hamotzi on 2 challahs. And we'd have chicken soup and brisket, and then everybody would go watch TV. But there was at least a semblance of a Shabbos. Yeah. But this Shabbos, my father's father and his second wife came for Shabbos, and so my father had to keep Shabbos for his father, and it was Mamish Shomer Shabbos. I invited over some friends from school. And it was mind-blowing. It was probably the first Shabbos I had ever experienced in my own home. It was an amazing thing. And I remember Friday night as I was, studying my parsha, there was Aunt Lena. We didn't call her grandma, we called her Aunt Lena, was sitting there with her hair covered saying Tehillim. It was... I never saw anything like this in my life. It was such a dramatic change. And so that was my bar mitzvah Shabbos. And so I had mine in synagogue, temple, the East Meadow Jewish Center. And I had one of those mimeographed speeches that I had to make, I didn't say an actual drasha, you understand? I read a speech. Heavenly Father, today I am a man. I stand here in the eyes of the God and of my relatives and of my Heavenly Father, may you bless them. Okay, I gave my little speech and that was it. I actually was so proactive that I asked if I could be the Shlech Tzibor for Shachris. Now, we had a cantor Karas, and the cantor did Shachris and Musaf, and they let me do Shachris. This was an amazing thing. They taught me the different tunes and things, And so it's my birthday, but basically, just to put this into perspective, my birthday is Gimel Shvat. I was born in Shvat, and I died in Shvat. I had my heart attack on Gimel Shvat on my birthday. It was a Shabbos, just like this year, it's a Shabbos. It was during my grandson's Shalom Zachar. And it was a bit of a downer because they bring in the stretcher in the middle of the party and carry me out. And, it's a little nerve-wracking. And the guy does the angiogram and he says, I don't know why you're still alive. You're not getting any blood to your heart. You're supposed to be dead. So I basically, decided that I died on that day. And I remember as they were carrying me out, I really felt pretty bad, and I said to my wife, oh no, I'm going to die. But only tzaddikim die on their birthday. And I've worked my whole life not to be a tzaddik. And it turns out I was right. I didn't die. But as far as I'm concerned, I died. I got out of the hospital on Tu B'Shvat after I did bypass. And the surgeon said he shouldn't have made it through the operation. So it was mamish nisim v'neflos, and I finally got out of there. I don't know why. In America, they kick you out pretty soon, like usually before before they've finished removing all the tubes. They just send you out, But here in Israel, they want to hold on to you. I had to really fight to get out of the hospital. I got out on Tu B'Shvat. And I remember they come by with a brochure because after you have heart surgery, even after you have an angiogram, you're entitled to go to what they call Beit HaChlama. Now, I don't think they have anything like this in America. I'm not sure, but they have it for women after childbirth. They send them to a Beit HaChlama. There's a famous one in Telstone. And it basically means that after you give birth, you go straight from the hospital to the Beit HaChlama. They take the baby to the nursery, and you rest up, and you have all your meals. You never have to get dressed. You just wear your robe the whole time. And if you're there on Shabbos, they have an arrangement that if your husband stays in Telstone, he can walk over for Shabbos and have the meals with you. They make arrangements. And my wife said they give you liver at every meal to help rebuild your blood supply, and it's a nice thing, gives you a little chance to recover. So after surgery, they also have a Beit HaChlama, and they're showing me these brochures. This one's by the ocean. This one's up in the mountains. This one's that. They're beautiful scenery. And my wife said, I think it's better for the children if you come home, because we were making a wedding. My daughter was getting married in another a week and a half. So everything's kind of upside down. And then people are going to feel like they have to come and visit you. And I said, no, they really don't. They just leave me there. In fact, Rabbi Center called me up. I used to speak sometimes by Rabbi Center's yeshiva. And Rabbi Center called me up and he says, Rabbi Dovid, I don't want you to go home. And I said, me too. And he says, I will pay to put you in the Ramada and have a nurse, come in to take care of you. The idea of me staying in a hotel with this nurse, I don't know, my wife wasn't so happy about that. I don't think he meant that she was going to stay in my room. But anyway, so I came home, and that was Tu B'Shvat. It was the night of Tu B'Shvat. And we always we don't have the official Tu B'Shvat Seder that they have, but we always try to see how many fruits we can gather together for Tu B'Shvat. And we usually get over 40. It's just very exciting. So I usually have my Sudas Haida'ah on Tu B'Shvat. So I was born in Shvat. I died on Shvat. I got better on Shvat. Now that doesn't always happen. In the Lord of the Rings, Gandalf died, but then he got better, So that's a very special thing. Captain America died, and then he got better, I only know this because I used to read comics when I was a kid, and I have a friend of mine who still stays up with the comics, So every now and then he fills me in on what's going on. And he says, Captain America died. I said, what? He says, don't worry, he got better, He says, yes, Superman died. I said, what? Yeah, don't worry, he got better. So I died, but don't worry, I got better. So I was born in Shvat. I died in Shvat. I got better in Shvat. Came back, and Chias Mesim, which is sort of what Tu B'Shvat is about, as we'll talk about when we get to Tu B'Shvat. And my father died in Shvat, Yud Zayin Shvat, and my mother died in Shvat, Chav Gimel Shvat. 20 years and 6 days apart. So Shvat's a big month for me. Yeah, a lot of stuff, everything seems to be put into Shvat. I was born in Shvat, had my heart attack in Shvat, my Sudas Haida'ah in Shvat, my father's yahrzeit's in Shvat, my mother's yahrzeit's in Shvat. Shvat becomes a very important month for me. And so I thought maybe we would take a little opportunity to talk about the month of Shvat. Now, we don't usually talk about the months. Sometimes we do, but it's a good thing to do. You'll find it in the Svarim. The Bnei Yissaschar, of course, has something on every single month. Sefer Yetzirah has something on every single month. And the month have special significance to it. Every month has a mazel. We spoke about this. Yeah, mazel does not mean good luck. It means the zodiac sign, and it means that there's certain influences in that particular month. My friend Ray Nissel, who was on the show, he was talking about the book that he had written about Rav Moshe Shapiro, if you'll no doubt recall. So he used the following mashal once. He's English. Americans can tell from his accent. English people can't always tell because since his wife is from Memphis, he's picked up something of a southern drawl mixed with a English accent. So it's like, a pleasure to meet you all, it's like sort of mixing your metaphors, yeah. So he gives the following mashal. He says, if you go into the underground, that's the London's term for their subway system, the underground, and there's one part of the underground that's a loop. You go around in the loop. He says, if you want to know where you are, you can check the name of the station. Or you could get out of the station and look around, and so you'll know. So if you get out of the station and you see a bunch of people in bowler hats carrying briefcases, then you know you're in the financial district. If you get out and you look around and you see, Buckingham Palace, then you're pretty sure you know where you are. That's an aspect of Malchus. Yeah. If you get out and you realize a bunch of, I don't think he used the term hippies. He had some kind of a term for people who are counterculture people. You're in Piccadilly Circus. So you can either look at the name of the station or you can look at what's around you and tell. The same thing is true with every month. Every month has a name, but the mazel describes for you what the month is all about. So Shvat is the Dli. It's kind of ironic because my English birthday is January 12th. And according to my English birthday, I'm a Capricorn. And somebody asked me who was into the zodiac. He says, what are you? He says, a Capricorn. He goes, well, that makes perfect sense. And he went to a whole ganze drasha, how I'm spitz Capricorn, I'm exactly a Capricorn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then at some point I realized in Judaism, it goes by your Hebrew birthday. So even though in January 12th I would be a Capricorn, going by Shvat, it would be an Aquarius, which is the Dli. I said, actually, I go by my Hebrew birthday, I'm an Aquarius. And he says, well, that makes perfect sense. You're such an Aquarius. And then he went to a whole ganze drasha how I was an Aquarius. This showed me that mazal is obviously not set in stone. If you there are certain aspects to it you can integrate, etc. Although all these methods are very interesting because Miriam Adahan had this book called Personality Types, and she based it on a footnote in one of Jung's journals that everybody is there's 4 two-letter sets. I don't remember them all, but either you're this or you're that, so either you're an introvert or an extrovert, either you're this or that. I don't remember them all, And basically the idea is that you figure out a person's personality by giving them a 4-letter code based on these 4 different aspects, and then that gives you insight into the person. There's a shorthand that you can always tell who the person is. So my wife was going to some of these Emet meetings when we first came to Israel, and she says, be very careful not to use these to generalize. But she says at every meeting, somebody would mention something about their husband or something. He goes, oh, that's of course, because he's such a EBDIW, whatever it is, And of course, everyone would label people, and that's what happens. When you create labels, you're going to label people. And it's always a very difficult system. Whenever you try to label somebody, it's a limitation. People are much too complicated to be reduced to a letter or to a type, etc. The Gemara says that a person is the entire world. The entire world is olam katan. A person is an olam katan. Everything that's in the world exists in a person. I said the world's a complicated place, and a person's a complicated being. you have to go into them. And people are always filled with contradictions, so that you can label somebody a particular thing, and then they will completely surprise you by going in the other direction. I've had this when I had to make major life decisions, and I wanted to go and seek Eitzah or a psak from a gadol. And people would tell me, well, if you go to Rabbi Yoshev, he'll tell you this. And if you go to Shlomo Zalman, he'll tell you this. If you go to this one, he'll tell you this. And I never found that to be true. Yeah, nobody ever gave me the answer that everyone told me was their shita, And I've had people who have told me things. It's mama's harig val yavar. It's harig val yavar. Yeah. When I actually speak to the God of Israel, they tell me, no, don't make an issue about it. And it's an amazing thing. You have to know that people are complicated. Sugyas are complicated. And you can't just give a simple answer to something. It's too pat. And so you have to really go into it to try to be able to figure out what a person is. But the reason I mention this is because at some point, after my wife had been going for a while, so I said, so what's my letter? She said, it's very hard to say, because in some ways you're an introvert and in some ways you're an extrovert. In some ways you're like this, in some ways like this and that. She goes, you're all the letters. Well, that makes sense, because, I am a complicated individual. So I'm not easily pigeonholed. So that's why when they were doing the mazolas, so when he tells me, oh, you're a Capricorn, I was a Capricorn. When he tells me you're an Aquarius, I was an Aquarius. It's hard to give a distinction. Now, obviously, it means that you have certain nitiyas. When the Chazal tell us that there's such a thing as mazolas, then that means that we look at it and try to figure it out. So Aquarius is basically, in Hebrew, they call it the dli, a bucket. And there's a lot of things that you can get from a dli. One thing is that dli is from a lashon dal, which is poor. And the only time that parents get a glimmer of nevuah is when they go to name their kids. It doesn't always seem to make sense to us, but names tell you a lot about the person. Rabbi Baruch Rabinowitz, who told me a story about the mezuzah Rebbe. The mezuzah Rebbe, Reb Ben Tov, was able to look at your mezuzah and tell you things about yourself, and basically tell you what you should do and give you eitzah, etc. It's a particular art form. Now, he spoke a Sephardi Hebrew, and he was in Brooklyn at this shul where everyone basically spoke Yiddish, so they couldn't understand each other. So Baruch Rabinowitz, who spoke both, they asked him if he would interpret. And he says he's a Kalta Litvak. He doesn't believe any of this stuff. He says, but he watched story after story after story where this guy would look at the mezuzah and just figure out who the person was from the mezuzah and tell him what to do. Yeah. And he told me some of the most amazing stories. Basically, he walked away as a believer. That's what he said, that he changed his position. He saw the most amazing things, story after story. And he says, so he once called up to ask him about somebody. And he says, oh, he's a ger. Now, if he called up and he said the guy's name was Avraham ben Avraham, that would be a real easy one. But it wasn't. He had a regular name and a regular last name. I know gerim who sometimes change their English last name to a Jewish name, even though it's not their real name. Sometimes they do it the other way. There was a period of time when Jews would change all their names to, English names. In fact, Joey Adams, who was a famous comedian, back in the 50s. So he had a very Jewish name. I forgot what it was. And he says, one time I was performing in Boston, and he says, I see your name is Adams. Perhaps we're related. I'm descended from President John Adams. So he says, are we related? He goes, I don't know. What was your name before you changed it? So it wasn't a name that you would associate with being a ger at all. And he heard the name and he says, oh, he's a ger. Now, how could he possibly tell that from the name? Apparently, you can tell a lot of things from a person's name. Now, I was named Dovid. I probably told the story before. My name is pretty complicated, you know. My name in English is David Howard. And if I told this before, I apologize. Yeah. My name is David Howard. So when I started in Hebrew Academy of Nassau County, they said, what's your name? I said, David Howard. I didn't know what my Jewish name was. We never used it. So he says, oh, Howard is Tzvi. So they told me my name was David Tzvi. I was okay with that. And then I went to, had my bar mitzvah. I got called up as David Tzvi. Yeah. And for years, I was David Tzvi. And then one time, get called up from Aliyah. My father says to me, who's Tzvi? I said, I am, Dad. He says, your name is Hirsch. That's why we named you Howard. Why would we name you Howard if your name was Tzvi? Now, that made perfect sense because they gave English names to match people's, to name people's Jewish names, you know? So my brother, who was Bendit Avram, they called him Bruce Adam. Ad kedei kach, you know? And my brother Gedalia Label, they named him Gary Lester. You don't hear the name Lester very often, you know? So I said, why would they name him Lester? My wife said, what were they going to do? Name him Gary Larry? I mean, how many names are with L? You know, I guess they could have named him Gary Leonard, but I don't know if that's any better than Lester. But, you know, so I was David Howard. Obviously, I must have been an H name. That's why they did that, you know? So I asked Scheinberg, and he said, Tzvi and Hirsch are the same name. Just keep them. So about a year before he died, he says to me, who's Tzvi Hirsch? I said, I am, Dad. He says, your name is Herschel. I said, sorry, there's no more room on the Dallas bag. I'm done. Tzvi Hirsch it is. I ain't moving from that. Herschel is obviously just Hirsch. You know, it's a diminutive, you know, like Racheli. I have a daughter, Racheli. Her name is Rachel, you know. But sometimes people... I named my daughter Miriam for my grandmother. My father said her name was really Mariam. Shkoyach, just a mispronunciation in Russian of Miriam, you know what I mean? You know, so her name was really Mariam, you know. When I named my daughter Rachel, yeah, that was for my mother's grandmother, my mother-in-law's mother. She goes, her name was really Rachel, you know, Shkoyach, you know, but... the only name I ever got right was I named it for my mother-in-law's Aunt Minnie. Her name was Mindel. I wasn't crazy about the name, but I said every name I named, everybody complained it wasn't the real name. I said, fine, you know, I'm going to name it Mindel. So I told her, we named her Mindel for Aunt Minnie. He goes, she never liked that name. And neither does my daughter, you know. So there you go. Anyway, so... apparently, you know, Mindel becomes Mindy, and in America, Mindy's, you know, not a problem. But in Israel, it's Mindy, you know. So she doesn't like that name. What am I going to do? But you get a moment of inspiration when you name your kids. So I was named Dovid, yeah, for Uncle David. Uncle David was married to Aunt Lena, not my Aunt Lena, who married my grandfather. It was, Lena was my grandmother's sister. And I named him David. So I asked my father once, who is this Uncle David? I never met him. You know, obviously I was named for him. Some drunk, some gambler. Yeah, he had no name, you know, so we gave him a name, you know. Now, the thing with my father is, you never knew if he was kidding or not. It could be he was kidding. I don't know. But he would not budge from his description of Uncle David. So at one point I asked my mother, he says that he was a drunk and a gambler. Because he wasn't a drunk. So he was a gambler? Yeah, he was a gambler. I said, so you named me for a gambler, So he says, listen, he only had one daughter and she didn't have any children. She hadn't gotten married. And she says, listen, you have a lot of sons and there's no one to name my father for. Could you give him a name, So they named me. My parents used to give names as a chesed, very often. So, and my second name came from the Dubnas. I once sat down with my father and I got down everybody's names because we didn't know what the names were. I got down all the names. My oldest brother, to this day, insists that I got his name wrong. Yeah. And I definitely did not because I asked my father specifically. It was Jason Seth, and he calls himself Yehoshua Shmuel. That's not his name. Yeah. His second name is Shepsel, because I did a little bit of check into the family history. There is no Shmuel on either side, but most of the second name came from the Dubnas. My father's mother was a Dubna, and most of them came from Dubna. Avram, who Bruce's name for, was a Dubna. Both Gedalia and Label were Dubnas. And there was Shepsel the cab driver. He was a Dubna. And that's where the names came from. And my mother's father died when she was a teenager. So it makes sense that her first son she would name for her father. And they called him Shia. That's what they called him, Shia. So when they said they named Mistama, they named him Shia. The Moel did what he said. But when he went to Hebrew school, they figured Shia was Yehoshua. But it's not. Shui would be Yehoshua. Shia is Yeshayahu. And in fact, I saw a picture of my grandfather's matzeva, and his name was Yeshayahu Nosan. So they called him Shia. So his real name is Yeshayahu Shepsel, and he insists that his name was Yehoshua Shmuel. But he passed away, his wife passed away. When I light a yortzeit candle for him, I say Yeshayahu Shepsel, and I at least have the name right. But I went over my father, what all the names were, and then I went through the yichus to find out where they all came from. So, but Dovid, I was for Uncle David, and it was done as a chesed, yeah. And but obviously, that means that some of my attributes are going to be in my name. So what's Dovid? What's pshat in Dovid? So Dovid means is related to the word dod, which is friend, right? Because Dovid was a friend of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was his buddy, right? Gemara in Sanhedrin says that there are two thrones, one for HaKadosh Baruch Hu and one for Malchus based Dovid. That was his go-to guy, was Dovid. And the word Dovid, the Daled is Dal. Vav is a connector. It means total connection to Hashem. And he remains Dal. No matter how great David did, he always remained lowly, Dal, like the Dali of Shvat. So the fact that I was named David in Shvat, obviously the Dali and the Dalet of David and the Dalet at the end of David. By the way, this is the idea of Yehuda also. It's Hashem's name, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, with a Dalet in it, to be Dal, to be lowly. So Shvat, the Dali, makes sense on a certain level for the fact that I'm named David, yeah? And I have to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me a tremendous chesed to always help me remain Dal. First of all, I've never won the lottery, even when I was sure I was going to win the lottery. The last time I was in America and the Powerball was like $1 billion, and I bought a ticket and I was so sure I was going to win, I was wrong, by the way. I did not. And frankly, if I did, I would not tell you. Because it would destroy my life. Anyway, but obviously he did not feel that I should be fabulously wealthy. I don't have to worry. I have Baruch Hashem. I have, as Jackie Mason once said, I have everything I need unless I want to buy something. Anyway, I don't need any money unless I want to buy something. But okay. But my father, from the time I was little, he would tell me, "You are a lo yutzlach, and you will never succeed in anything. And if I don't take care of you, you will starve to death." And I have integrated that message, so it never matters. Somebody said to me, I listened to your recordings from 30 years ago, and I listened to you today, and you sound exactly the same. Well, first of all, I haven't developed any new material. But besides that, I sound exactly the same because I've never picked up any airs. Because anytime I try to think, oh, wow, I got a lot of people listening to me, that. So first of all, I read all the negative comments, so that always helps keep me grounded. But besides that, all the nice things that people say, I just hear my father saying, "Don't listen to them. We know better. You'll yitzlach and you'll never succeed." So it always helps to keep me down and keep me humble, which is very good. Keeps you grounded. And that was what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did with Dovid HaMelech, because he knew that he's going to be the Melech. He's going to have power. And when you have that much power, power corrupts. So therefore, there was rumors that he was a mamzer. His father Yishai thought he was a mamzer. The whole story of how that happened. But besides that, Doeg told Shaul, you don't worry about him. He can't be king. He comes from Moab. He's not even allowed to be a Jew. So they always thought he was a Moavi. And then there was always the Shaul camp and the Dovid camp. And then, of course, the Shaul camp morphed into the camp that was angry at him for marrying Bathsheba and killing Uriah Hitti. And there were people who would condemn him till the day he died. Gemara says he'd be in the middle of giving a shir, and suddenly somebody would raise their hand, didn't matter what it was about, and say, what's the punishment for someone who sleeps with a married woman? Says he gets the death penalty, but he has a place in Olam Haba. But someone who embarrasses someone in public doesn't have a place in Olam Haba. This is what he put up with. And until Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis HaMikdash and the doors would not open until he said, Mizmah Shir Chanukah Bayis LeDavid, it says, then the enemies of David, their faces paled, and they suddenly realized, I guess we were wrong about him. But it took a long time for that. There were people who opposed the Rambam right up after his death. Still, they opposed the Mishnah Torah. Rabbeinu Yonah wrote Shari Tshuva for having opposed the Rambam. And, history bears us out. The Ramchal was persecuted during his lifetime. It was only afterwards that people realized who he was. So, so there's dollars. But Dli is something else also, and that is a pail is there to be able to fill with water and to distribute it. It was very interesting. Someone said to me, when did you decide to become a rabbi? I said, as soon as I became frum. I'm an extremist by nature. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And my father, who wasn't necessarily happy with my decision to become frum, he says, you don't have to become a rabbi. You could do a lot of other good things. And I said, but I want to help people. I want to use my gifts to help people. And by the way, that to me, I believe, is one of the most important missions that every person has in this world, is to ask themselves, how can I help the world? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me koiches. I've told this story already about how this agent offered to represent me when I was living in LA, and he felt that I could really make it and in the comedy clubs and then get my own show. And I said, okay, lots of people hear that. Yeah. That was the theme of the song, Do You Know the Way to San Jose? Yeah. And all the stars that never were are waiting, parking cars and pumping gas. Yeah. So I'm going back to San Jose. I came to LA. I'm thinking I'm going to become a big star. So first of all, I said, listen, everybody thinks they're going to become a star. I said, but besides that, if a Kodesh Baruch Hu actually gave me koiches, so I can spend them on myself, or I can use them for Klal Yisrael. So I chose to use it for Klal Yisrael. But I made that decision. So it came from so I was tested at that point, but I knew that's what I was going to do. So when I went to Stei Chemed, I had a learning director from Chavetz Chaim. So basically, he convinced me that you're going to go to Chavetz Chaim for 15 years and become a Rosh Yeshiva. So okay, but I was clearly not cut out to become a Rosh Yeshiva. So I figured, okay, I'll become a elementary school Rebbe, But I definitely don't have the personality for that. That requires a tremendous amount of seder and self-control and maturity, none of which I have to this day. So instead, I stumbled into NCSY. I went to Kirov. Suddenly, I found I had a gift for that. So I went into that field, But I always, interesting, didn't know anything about the mazalas, but I always saw myself as a bucket to be able to be a conduit, to be able to take a Kodesh Baruch Hu's Torah and give it to other people through whatever means I could find available. I've mentioned this many times, that I've had tremendous siyata d'shmaya in my life. And my first job that I had, which was an NCSY advisor in LA, I was tricked into taking. And then I was offered regions all around the country, and I took Long Island, not knowing that it was dead at the time. And I was very successful. And then I came to Eretz Yisrael, and my friend Rabbi Orlofsky encouraged me to start teaching in Dovid. And Ari Khan pressured me into teaching on discovery. And I was pressured into teaching in a seminary, and I was pressured into this and pressured into that. And I never looked for a job. People always came to me and offered me jobs. And when I finally left, whatever job, because I would leave a job when I felt I maxed it out, and another one came its way, nothing ever came its way. So suddenly I started getting offers to speak in America. So I said, okay, I'll become a speaker. And I traveled around. I used to go, I would have a trip every 2 months, and for anywhere between a week and 2 weeks, I was speaking all over the place. And then it suddenly just stopped. Nobody offered me anymore. And, I once in a while have a trip, but, it's unusual. So it just dried up. And I said, it's sobering, especially it's going to be my birthday. I'm 66 years old. That's not as old as you'd think, I tell people I retired early, but I didn't plan to. I just didn't have any jobs. So it was Mamela. So I said, it's sobering that Kodesh Baruch Hu's through at me, I'm done. So someone says, no, you have a podcast. I said, yeah, for an hour a week, I sit in front of a camera, He says, yeah, but how often do you get an audience of between 10 and 20,000 people? That's hard to fit into a room. So Kodesh Baruch Hu is using you as a means to be Marbit's Torah, or whatever it is that we do here, through this. You reach a lot more people in this means. So okay, I recognize that. But maybe that's the Mazel Dali, and why the month of Shvat, so much of my life focuses around it. I'm almost positive I told this story before, and you'll forgive me. I know there are those people out there who listen to every single show and commit it to memory, and they say, oh, I've heard this one already. So I'm sure I must have said this story beforehand, but there are these things called value clarifications, where you present people with a no-win scenario just to see what they would do. So there's a whole bunch of them. So one of them is like you say to a group of kids, you're a doctor. And as a doctor, you're sworn to preserve life. And they wheel in this old man, and you recognize him as the Nazi who is in charge of the concentration camp that killed your parents. Do you operate and save his life or not? So it forces you to make choices. There are no right choices. And those of you who are Star Trek fans will probably recognize this as the Kobayashi maneuver, where there is no correct answer. Nobody ever won the Kobayashi maneuver. I think that's what it's called. And the Trekkies will correct me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Where basically there's a hospital ship and it's in Klingon territory, and if you go in, you're violating, their territory, and if you don't, then they're going to be destroyed. So no matter what you do, it fails. The whole point of the test is to just test your reactions in a no-win situation. No one ever passed it except for Captain Kirk. And someone asks him finally, how did you do that? And he says, I reprogrammed the computer so that I could be successful. So they said, you cheated. He says, I don't believe in no-win situations. Yeah. So, but these value clarifications are those where there's no good answer and you're forced to make a choice. The Gemara does this very often, where it presents a scenario where you have no choice but to make a choice. And, two people are drowning. Which one do you save? Can't you save them both? Like Spider-Man did in the first Spider-Man movie, where he managed to save Mary Jane and the car full of people that were being dropped from the Roosevelt Island tram. No, you can't save them both. You're not a superhero. So now you have to make a choice, So this is a value clarification, and it's called Crocodile Island. It says there's a Romeo and Juliet, and they love each other desperately, and they want to be together. But Romeo is on Crocodile Island. It's called Crocodile Island because the river is filled with crocodiles, and if you try to swim it, you'll get eaten by the crocodiles. The only way to get across is with the ferryman. And Juliet is so desperate to see Romeo that she finally says to the ferryman, please, please take me across. And he says, yes, if you sleep with me. So she doesn't know what to do. She definitely doesn't want to do that and be disloyal. On the other hand, she wants to be with Romeo. So she asks wise Ivan, and he doesn't want to get involved. So she figures she has no choice. She agrees to the boatman's terms. She comes across. And when Romeo realizes how she got across, he tosses her aside and wants nothing to do with her. And now, after she made this tremendous sacrifice out of Romeo, she's so hurt, she goes to her friend Sluggo, who then beats up Romeo within an inch of his life. And as the sun sets, Juliet is laughing. And the question is, who's the worst person in the story? There are no good people. Who's the worst person in the story? Some people say Romeo, because what everyone else did, they did out of love, and he just did it out of hatred. Some people say the boatman, because he took advantage of someone in need. Other people say, hey, he was a capitalist. He didn't force her. If you wanted to pay the price, fine. If not, not. Some people say Sluggo. He's the only one who resorted to violence. Anyway, there's different kind of answers. So the guy who was running the group, he has presented this many times, and he as soon as he presents it, he looks at me and says, what do you say? I said, wise Ivan. And he says, what? I said, wise Ivan. He's the worst guy in the story. And he goes, no one picks wise Ivan. Why would you pick wise Ivan? I said, because he's the only one who could have prevented this, and he refused. He says, that's fascinating. So in your value system, if you could help somebody and you don't, that's the worst thing you could imagine. And I didn't realize that. Sometimes there are moments where you come to a realization. I didn't realize that's what I felt. Just like I didn't know I have all these learning disabilities, but when I was already teaching, they brought down a specialist to give a presentation on learning disabilities. So they put this slide up, which was basically like a mosaic. And they say, does everyone see what this is? And everyone says, yeah, the letter Ches. And they say, right, a kid with this learning disability won't see the letter Ches. And I'm staring at it. I don't see anything. Which should have been a tip-off to me, but I didn't realize that means that I have the learning disability. I just thought, oh, that's weird. I don't see a letter Ches. But because I hadn't realized it. But yeah, in my value system, being able to help people is not. That's a deli. A deli means that you are a bucket to be able to be used as a means to be able to be a conduit. And so as I approach my 66th birthday, I think to myself that the greatest thing that anybody could do in this world is to be able to use the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you to be able to help other people. As Rav Noach Weinberg used to say, you don't have to know everything. Whatever you know, you can teach. And that's true. Everybody today is an ambassador. Everybody has to, teach what they know to people, because there's always people who know less than you. And there's always people who are waiting to gain from your knowledge. And everybody stood at Har Sinai. Everybody's a letter in the Sefer Torah, which means that everybody has a chelik of Torah that only they have, and only they can give over that vart. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless all of us, that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the means to be able to help Klal Yisrael, so that at the end we can turn around and say that at least, if nothing else in my life, I tried to be able to help other people find their way back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now we come to the question and answer portion of our program. The first question is by Anonymous. I find that you basically submit the majority of the questions. What's the meaning of Ein Simcha Ela B'Basar V'Yayin? How is it possible for Chazal to say that the happiness of Yontif can only come from food? That sounds very materialistic. Yeah, it is. What's your problem? Now, to be fair, this is a machlekes in the Gemara. The phrase that I'm sure all of us have heard is Chatzi Lachem v'Chatzi LaHashem. I say that all of us have heard, even though I know that after my podcast with Tuvia Singer, I have picked up more non-Jewish listeners to the podcast. There were always some, but I get emails that there are more non-Jews who are watching now, so you probably never heard this phrase. Yeah, and that is Shabbos is completely for God. Kula LaHashem. It's completely for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all holy. And that's why there's no din of simcha on Yantiv. There's only oneg, right, which is spiritual pleasure. But by Yantif, we say Chatzi Lachem v'Chatzi LaHashem. Half of Yantif is for you to enjoy, and half is for Hashem. The half that is for Hashem, well, that's learning and davening. And there's no mitzvah to eat sudas on Yantif. That's what that shita holds. You don't have to. And according to the other one, half of the day is spent in spirituality, and half of the day is spent in physical pleasures. Eating and drinking and having good things. So isn't that just physical pleasures? Yeah, that's right. Because you is not an angel. You be half of an animal. Half of you is human. And the human part of you delights in physical pleasures. Those are called ta'anugim. And we make brachas on the physical pleasures because we enjoy them. If you see something nice, you make a bracha. If you see something awe-inspiring, you make a bracha. If you eat something, if you smell something, if you get a pleasure in this world, a hana, physical pleasure in this world, you make a bracha on it. Yeah. There's no question about it that it's physical pleasure. Having said that, I have a friend of mine who's a vegetarian, and he says that's not what the Gemara meant. Ein simcha ela bebasa shlomim. On Yontif, there was a special mitzvah to bring two types of korbanos. A korban re'iyah, which was an ola, which is completely burnt on the mizbeach, right? The kohanim don't eat it. The owners don't eat it. Everything is burnt on the mizbeach. And that's why when you move to Israel, it's called making aliyah, and you become an ola, because this country will completely eat you up until there's nothing left but ashes. But that's the korban re'iyah. And then there's, because you don't come to God empty-handed. And then there's Korban Chagiga, which is a shlamim, a special shlamim you're supposed to bring. And by eating Korban shlamim on Yontif, that is ein simcha ela be'basar shlamim, because it's a korban, and you eat it besimcha. And that's why a person who's in mourning is not allowed to eat kodshim. Yeah, so it's that kind of a simcha. However, there are others who hold plain and pashut, basa v'yayin, eating meat and drinking wine. Having said that, if meat and wine make you sick, then you'd not mechuyev to make yourself sick over it. If it doesn't make you sick, but you just, are not a fan, so, okay. Now, full disclosure, and I know by this point, people will be shocked that I might say something controversial, but when I'm not a fan of fleischiks. I sure was when I was growing up. I was always having fleischiks. But as I got older, I can't digest fleischiks. You sit down to a Shabbos lunch with cholent and kugel and kishka and chopped liver and a lot of challah and cold cuts. I'm sick for the next 3 days. I can't digest it. You reach a certain age where the list of foods that you can't digest becomes longer and longer. And I have to decide if I'm going to be sick, what I'm going to have. So I have to psych myself up before I have a falafel. I happen to like falafel a lot. I know I'm going to be sick for 3 days, but sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and do what you got to do. I happen to love frankfurters. It's one of my favorite foods, and I know it's going to make me sick. My mother too. My mom would ask me to get her frankfurters, My brother, Bruce, who was watching over her because she had everything in the world wrong with her. She was in terrible health. She's my inspiration, by the way, for the sponsors who say, we hope that you stick around. My mom made it to 89 in the worst health. She had a heart failure for 20 years, diabetes, everything in the world was wrong with her, and she made it to 89. So I'm hoping that in spite of all of my many health problems, I will rely on what the Chavetz Chaim said. Arichas Yamim has nothing to do with gesund. You don't have to be healthy to live a long life. You can live a long, sick life. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Anyway, so that way, I don't think I'll die. I'll just linger. Well, that's all part of reaching a certain age. As a friend of mine said, if I wake up in the morning and nothing hurts me, I know I'm dead. But my mother she would say to me, could you get me a frankfurter? I'd say, sure. And my brother would say, did you get Mom a frankfurter? I said, yeah. He goes, she can't eat that. I said, I know, but I'm going back to Israel and she's your problem. So, I'm here. I'm just here to make her happy. And I hope that'll move me up in the standings for the inheritance. It didn't, but it was worth a shot. But anyway, so I'd see my mother. I said, how was the frankfurter? She goes, oh, it was great. I was up all night throwing up. But it was worth it, So to eat that kind of a Shabbos lunch is very hard. So we have milchiks for lunch, That's what that we do because that's more of an onik for me. But on Yontif, we bite the bullet. And I always make basar, not chicken. We might have chicken, but I'll make something with meat in it. So we may be having chicken for the main course, but I'll make my mother's meat simis. I have given the recipe. Or we might be having chicken, but I'll make my mom's Chinese rice, which has chopped meat and egg and scallion in it, soy sauce. I've given the recipe. And, or I'll be having that and I'll have cabbage soup, which has flanken in it. I've given the recipe. So I'll have something in it that has basar in it, and I'll have a glass of wine. I never learned how to drink. I don't really know how to appreciate wine. But I'll have a glass of wine at a Suda. Something that's a little easier for me to drink, than the real fancy dry wines. But that's pshat of ein simcha ela b'basa, ein simcha ela b'yayin. Yes, it is physical, and that is the concept of Yontif, that if you hold Chatzi Lachem and Chatzi Lashem, the half that is for you is to enjoy it with physical pleasures. And that's it for this week. Until next time, you can check out my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. You can sponsor an episode, and thank you to all of the sponsors. You keep the show going. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can sponsor a Parsha in 5. You can ask a question, make a comment. You can download the Rabbi Orlofsky show theme song. Lots of stuff to do there. And that's it for this episode. Until next time, I am Dovid Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.